what effect is this judgment likely to have on other doctors and nurses? What's their reaction been since this judgment was announced?
Well, the other doctors have said that they are supporting their colleagues. They are going to be holding nightly vigils outside both the women's penitentiary and also the men's, since there are ladies and gentlemen in separate prisons. And I should mention that the nurses currently are not on strike. So right now, the only medical personnel that are in the hospitals are the nurses, and they're pretty much keeping the ship afloat, so to speak. But the concern is, what if the nurses strike, which has been another threat, in which case then we could really be in for some problems.
Now, let's look at neighboring Somalia, for instance. I mean, there's a lot of crisis going on there, and the citizens largely rely on health facilities from Kenya. How has this affected them? I mean, you mentioned that just the nurses and the hospital, are they able to cope with the high influx of patients even coming from Somalia?
Well, I don't know if there's an influx necessarily coming from Somalia during this particular time. I can say that, you know, for the ordinary Kenyan or whoever may be here, the concern for them are these ordinary, you know, diseases, ordinary for Africa, like malaria, also motorbike accidents, you know, if you have a pregnancy complication. These are all issues anyone really has a problem if they're trying to go to the hospital and access basic health care. And, you know, local media has reported that there have been deaths because of this doctor's strike. So, you know, some people are very frustrated with doctors. They say, get back to work. We can't continue to live like this. But then I think a lot of people are actually quite sympathetic with the doctors. And they say, you know what? Doctors, teachers, university lecturers, all of these groups have or are going on strike. And I think that people are fed up with some of the corruption scandals, which you mentioned earlier. And I think people just really want the government to pay professionals what they're worth. But again, there is the very, very dire situation of a healthcare crisis in the country. So it's an interesting time right now.
Now, if you say that a lot of people are sympathetic with the doctors, does it mean that the government is likely to listen to their demands?
That's a great question. You know, the government has said that they will increase salaries by about 40%. The doctors union is asking for 150 to 80% increase, plus additional things like, you know, basic improvements in the hospital and just general upgrades of that hospital system. So it's very hard to see how the negotiations are going to go when there is such a large divide between the desires on each side. With that said, we can only hope that you know, some of the mediation teams that have been brought in, hopefully this next go around they'll be more successful. But another point is that the doctors who are not currently in jail, they have said that they are in solidarity with those on the inside. So essentially, the people on the inside who were doing all of the negotiations with the government, the people on the outside, so to speak, they have refused to do any negotiations with the government until their colleagues are let out of jail. So again, that adds another problem to the whole situation.
Of course, it's a developing story, and we'll continue to keep our eyes on the stories that come from Kenya in the coming days. Thank you very much, Jill Craig, VOA correspondent.
Thank you very much.
We're moving on now. Rights group Amnesty International says there's a rise in brutal tactics used by Tunisian security forces to counter terrorism. According to Amnesty, security forces are resorting to torture, arbitrary arrest, detentions and travel restrictions of suspects, as well as harassment of their family members. The rights group also says some 5,000 people have been blocked from traveling abroad to prevent them from joining jihadist groups. Victims spoke of being brutally beaten with sticks and rubber hoses, subjected to electric shocks, deprived of sleep, or had cold water poured on them. The organization says the accounts were a grim reminder of rule under the former president Zine al-Abidine Ben Ali, who was ousted in the 2011 uprising. 6 journalists charged with spreading false information are to appear in court in Côte d'Ivoire. The journalists who work for 3 opposition newspapers reported on Saturday that the government had agreed to pay the mutineers about $11,000 each to persuade them to return to work. But this information contradicts an official statement that the troops had apologized and no money was involved. During the mutiny, members of an elite unit fired into the air at their base in the southeastern town of Idiaki near the border with Ghana. This comes a month after regular soldiers staged a mutiny over pay and conditions. And security forces in Sudan have found bomb-making materials and foreign passports after an explosion at a flat in capital Khartoum. The police say a man was wounded while assembling a bomb. He was reported to have gone to a nearby hospital but left when staff refused to treat him unless they informed the authorities. A hunt is now on for the man and several other people. Local residents say many Egyptians, Somalis and Syrians live in the apartment where the explosion took place. Tens of thousands of Syrians have arrived in Sudan since the civil war in their country began in 2011. Meanwhile, South Sudan's President Salva Kiir has dismissed accusations of ethnic bias within the country's armed forces following the resignation of the deputy army chief. Lieutenant General Thomas Krilo Swaka had accused the military of orchestrating violence in 2013 along tribal lines. He also accused the government of deliberately violating a 2015 peace agreement and prolonging the country's civil war. Of course, President Salva Kiir has denied the claims, saying the dominance of his Dinka group in the force was not a result of bias, but because others simply did not sign up during military recruitment. And elsewhere, the Parliament for Somalia's breakaway Northern Territory of Somaliland says that the United Arab Emirates can establish a military base in its territory. The Emirati government submitted a formal application last month seeking permission from the Somaliland government to open a military base in the port town of Berbera. Somaliland is not officially recognized as an independent country, and this agreement may put it at loggerheads with Somalia's federal government, which has just elected a new president. Now, reports indicate that American President Donald Trump may be having a telephone conversation with Nigeria's president still on vacation in London. Well, the telephone conversation should be taking place about now, and it's the first time Mr. Trump will be speaking to any African leader since his assumption of office. It's not clear what the conversation will center on, but the British Prime Minister Theresa May was the first leader to visit Mr. Trump on assumption of office, and the American president has since been putting calls to other world leaders to enunciate his action plans towards the rededication of terrorism or the eradication of terrorism in Africa. Network Africa continues in a moment with focus on other stories from a Zimbabwean artist who's turning refuse into art. Please stay with us.